This is incredible. In today's video, we are going to go over some very shocking things that were revealed about another world that exists right here on Earth. But these revelations came from an unexpected source. It came from a medical examiner who was hired to examine the body of a mysterious individual who appeared to have died while crossing the border from Mexico into Texas. This case is absolutely wild, and it reveals things about this other world that most people aren't aware of. Let's go. Before we get into this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We are so close to hitting 1 million subscribers. We are in the top 99% of channels on YouTube, and we are one of the fastest growing channels on YouTube right now. So if you aren't subscribed, please make sure you do so you don't miss any future updates. Also, after watching this video, please leave a comment below letting me know what you think about this other world that exists right here on Earth. On February of 2021, U.S. Border Patrol agents stationed in the remote desert region of southwest Texas noticed some strange activity. They had received reports from locals of a group of individuals who had illegally crossed the border from Mexico and were heading north into Texas. These people were not from around here. The local residents knew something was up, and they alerted the authorities. When the Border Patrol agents arrived at the scene, they found 4 individuals who matched the description given by the locals. The individuals were cold to the touch and had no signs of life. It was clear that they had been dead for some time. The first thing that caught the attention of the Border Patrol agents was the clothing worn by these 4 individuals. They were all dressed in what appeared to be military-style uniforms, but there were no markings or insignia on the uniforms that could identify what country or organization they were associated with. The clothing was strange, but it was the physical characteristics of the bodies that really piqued the interest of the authorities. The 4 individuals were Caucasian and had what appeared to be Asian-type features. Their eyes were almond-shaped, and their facial structures were somewhat distinctive. The Border Patrol agents immediately contacted the FBI, and a local medical examiner was brought in to examine the bodies. The bodies were taken to the medical examiner's office, where an examination was conducted to determine the cause of death and to try to identify the individuals. The medical examiner was a seasoned professional who had seen his fair share of bizarre cases, but this one was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. As he began the examination, he noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. The bodies bore no visible wounds or injuries that could have caused their deaths. There were no bullet holes, no signs of struggle, and no obvious cause of death. This was the first anomaly in this strange case. As the medical examiner continued his examination, he noticed something else that was out of the ordinary. The bodies showed no signs of decomposition, even though they had apparently been dead for several days. Decomposition is a natural process that begins shortly after death, but in this case, it had either been halted or was moving at an extremely slow pace. This was another piece of the puzzle that made no sense. The medical examiner continued his examination and discovered something that would send shock waves through the small town. The individuals did not have souls. The medical examiner wasn't a man of faith, but he knew that there was something more to these bodies than met the eye. The lack of decomposition and the absence of visible injuries pointed to a cause of death that was outside the realm of his expertise. Was this a case of mass poisoning? Had the individuals died from a rare disease? Or was there something more sinister at play? The medical examiner contacted the FBI and informed them of his findings. The FBI was interested in this case from the beginning, but they had been unable to uncover any information about the 4 individuals or their origins. The lack of identification was a major obstacle in the investigation. The medical examiner was able to determine the cause of death, but it didn't bring any closer to solving the mystery of who these people were and how they died. The news of the mysterious deaths spread quickly through the town, and soon the entire community was buzzing with theories. Some believed that the individuals were part of a secret cult that had come to the area to perform a ritual. Others believed that they were victims of foul play, perhaps the target of a deranged killer or a secret society. The theories were endless, but no one could have imagined the truth. The bodies had been in the morgue for several days, but the medical examiner couldn't bring himself to release them to the authorities. He wanted to know more, and he wasn't going to rest until he got answers. He had a hunch that the key to solving this mystery lay in the bodies themselves, but he just needed to find the right way to unlock the secrets they held. Then it hit him. The bodies had shown no signs of decomposition, which meant that they were not technically dead. They were alive, but in a state of suspended animation. The medical examiner had stumbled upon something that was beyond his wildest dreams. The 4 individuals were not human. They were extraterrestrials who had crash-landed in the desert and somehow managed to survive. He knew that he had stumbled onto something big, but he didn't know what to do next. He needed help, but he couldn't call the police or the military. He couldn't risk exposing the existence of extraterrestrials to the world. He needed to keep this a secret, but he also needed help. In a moment of inspiration, the medical examiner contacted a friend of his, a retired military officer who had experience in dealing with classified information. He explained the situation to the officer and asked for his help. The officer was skeptical, but he trusted the medical examiner and agreed to help. Together, they devised a plan to transport the bodies to a secure location where they could be studied further. With the help of a few trusted individuals, they loaded the bodies onto a truck and drove them away from the town. They took them deep into the desert, far away from prying eyes and ears. There, in the middle of nowhere, they buried the bodies in a shallow grave. The medical examiner knew that this was only a temporary solution. He needed to find a way to study the bodies without anyone knowing. He reached out to a former colleague of his who worked at a private research facility. The facility was owned by a wealthy individual who was interested in all things mysterious and paranormal. The medical examiner explained the situation to his colleague and asked if he could bring the bodies to the facility for study. His colleague agreed, and the medical examiner wasted no time in transporting the bodies there. At the facility, the medical examiner and his team conducted a series of tests on the bodies. They examined their physiology, their DNA, and their overall structure. They tried to determine if they were human, alien, or something in between. What they found was beyond their wildest imaginations. The bodies were not human, but they were not alien either. They were from another world, a world that existed right here on Earth, but was hidden from human perception. The medical examiner and his team had stumbled upon a secret that had been hidden for centuries. But how did these beings from another world end up in the desert? The medical examiner and his team were able to determine that the bodies had been in a state of suspended animation for several months. This meant that they had not been dead the entire time, and they were somehow still alive. The question was, how did they get to this world, and why were they in a state of suspended animation? The medical examiner and his team were able to determine that the beings had come from a parallel universe that was very similar to ours, but there were some key differences. In their world, technology was much more advanced, and they had the ability to manipulate time and space. Somehow their ship had malfunctioned, and they had ended up in our world. To protect themselves from detection, they had put themselves into a state of suspended animation. But how did they die? The medical examiner and his team were able to determine that the beings had died from a lack of oxygen. Their ship had been damaged and was unable to provide them with the oxygen they needed to survive. They had managed to survive for several months, but eventually they had suffocated. The medical examiner and his team were able to solve the mystery of the bodies, but they knew that the secret would be too much for the world to handle. They decided to keep it hidden and to bury the truth. The beings from another world were given a proper burial, and the secret of their existence was locked away. The medical examiner and his team continued their work at the facility, studying everything they could about the other world and its inhabitants. They hoped that one day they would be able to unlock the secrets of the universe and to understand the true nature of reality. And that's all for this video. Please let me know what you thought about this other world that exists right here on Earth, and what you think happened to these extraterrestrials who crash-landed in Texas. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and come back soon for another video. Thanks for watching.